8 justices of the Supreme Tribunal of Justice of Venezuela, allies of Chavismo, were removed from the court. It's yet another chapter of a sweeping cleanup of the regime mediated by the Trump administration after the capture of Nicolás Maduro.
A sweeping cleanup in Venezuela's Supreme Court, directly ordered by the United States, has raised an alert in Brazil's federal Supreme Court. The interim president of Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez, has carried out one of the most significant changes toward transforming the regime into a democracy by removing 8 justices from the Supreme Tribunal of Justice, all of whom were involved in persecutions and harsh sentences against opponents of Chavismo. This move shows that Washington is willing to intervene directly in the internal affairs of Latin American countries, making it clear that none of the authorities are definitively above the law.
There is a man in Brazil who was not elected by anyone, who cannot be dismissed by any president. A man who has never held any elected office, who judges and in judging governs like no other. This man is Gilmar Ferreira Mendes, a justice of the Federal Supreme Court for more than 2 decades.
So in your view, is organized crime inside the Supreme Court?
It connects to the actions of at least 3 justices and the Attorney General. It's a technical analysis with no ideological or partisan character. It's simply the realization that, in a republic, no one can be above the law.
The controversial decisions of justices of the Brazilian Supreme Court, combined with the involvement of Dias Toffoli and Alexandre de Moraes with Banco Master, and the recent statements by Gilmar Mendes, who said that the Supreme Court will intervene in cases of impeachment proceedings against justices, reinforce the regional tension. The example of Venezuela serves as a warning. The United States is acting decisively on the continent, and in this context, the current crisis between the branches of government in Brazil can be interpreted as a test of limits. The message is clear. When Washington's patience is challenged, the response usually comes quickly and without hesitation. Welcome to Vida No Quartel. The fall of 8 justices from the Venezuelan Supreme Court, which is equivalent to the Supreme Federal Court in Brazil, represents a historic milestone since these judges were considered untouchable within the Chavista structure. With the capture and arrest of Nicolás Maduro, a new political phase began in Venezuela, marked by the removal of key figures from the top leadership who supported the regime. This change, even though it is led by an interim president connected to Chavismo, shows that international pressure, especially from the United States, is reshaping the country's political landscape. Although Delcy Rodriguez keeps controversial figures, such as Diosdado Cabello, in the Ministry of the Interior, the pressure on Caracas remains intense. The presence of Cabello, who is wanted by the United States with a reward of $25 million for his capture, and other military leaders, such as General Pedrino Lopez, shows that the political transition is still far from complete. According to analysts, the White House seems to be using the interim president as a strategic tool to pave the way for more decisive actions in the future. Among these possible actions, the capture of Diosdado Cabello and General Pedrino Lopez is treated as a top priority by Washington. This reinforces the idea that the United States is not only seeking to weaken Chavismo, but also to eliminate key figures who represent resistance to democratic progress in Venezuela. The current movement, therefore, may be just the beginning of a larger offensive with direct repercussions on regional politics and the balance of power within Latin America. However, many saw in these dismissals of members of the Venezuelan High Court a possible preview of what could happen in Brazil, since the institutional crisis of the Supreme Federal Court is increasingly worrying.
A report by the newspaper O Globo revealed messages that the owner of Banco Master, Daniel Vorcaro, sent to Supreme Court Justice Alexandre de Moraes on the day he was arrested for the first time.
The report showed screenshots of 9 messages sent by Daniel Vorcaro to Moraes on November 17th of last year. The data was on Vorcaro's cell phone, which was seized by the federal police on that same day.
Justices, who should be examples of integrity for society, are involved in corruption schemes and fraud linked to Banco Master. The federal police has already confirmed the connection of Minister Dias Toffoli as a partner in a resort that received investments from a fund linked to Master, as well as the office of Alexandra de Moraes' wife. They signed an agreement worth $129 million, of which $80 million were paid before the extrajudicial liquidation of Master by the central bank. These facts raise serious doubts about the credibility of the country's highest court. Given this scenario, many are wondering if the events involving the upper echelons of the Brazilian judiciary might be connected to the maneuvers by the United States in the removal of half of the Venezuelan Supreme Court justices. The comparison is inevitable. If Washington has already shown a willingness to intervene directly in internal affairs in countries like Venezuela and Cuba, Brazil may be facing similar pressure. The idea that no authority is above the law is gaining strength, and the possibility of profound changes in the Brazilian judiciary is starting to be discussed more intensely.
You can't lecture anyone, Your Excellency.
And neither can you, Your Excellency. You need to respect me, Your Excellency. You have no standing whatsoever. You are destroying the justice of this country, and now you come here to lecture me about morals. Go out on the street, Minister Gilmar, go out on the street.
Minister Joachim, we've already moved past this discussion with my request for a review.
Your Excellency is in no condition at all. You are in no condition.
I'm out on the street, Minister Joachim. Your Excellency is creating a damaging problem.
Your Excellency is not out on the street, no. Your Excellency is in the media, destroying the credibility of the Brazilian judiciary.
Me deixa de fora desse seu mau sentimento. Você é uma pessoa horrível, uma mistura do mal com atraso e pitadas de psicopatia. Isso não tem nada.
Your Excellency destroying the
ofensas, grosserias. Vossa Excelência não consegue articular um argumento, fica procurando, já ofendeu a presidente, já ofendeu o ministro Fux, agora chegou a mim. A vida para Vossa Excelência é ofender as pessoas, não tem nenhuma ideia. Não tem...
of the Brazilian judiciary. You only offend people. You offend people with an aggressive, coarse, rude temperament. That's terrible. Your honor alone discredits the court. It's very bad. It's very painful for all of us to have to put up with your honor here.
The message that's being conveyed is clear. No one is above the law. The example of Venezuela with the removal of 8 Supreme Court justices shows that even figures considered untouchable can be removed when there is international pressure and when the legitimacy of institutions is called into question. This perception that Supreme Court justices are untouchable has already been debunked in other Latin American countries, such as Chile and El Salvador, where judges were removed for directly interfering in the executive branch. In Brazil, however, the situation is different. So far, no justice has been held accountable, and there is no investigation directly looking into their conduct, even in the face of allegations and evidence of involvement in corruption schemes. Many things have happened in recent months, directly connecting Donald Trump's government policies to events in Latin America. The capture of Maduro in a cinematic invasion of Venezuelan territory, the establishment of FBI bases in Paraguay and Ecuador, the expulsion of a Brazilian federal police officer, along with the bombing of drug trafficking infrastructure on the border between Ecuador and Colombia. These events show an escalation of coordinated actions by the United States. Now, with the fall of 8 Venezuelan Supreme Court justices and the advance of the Shield of the Americas, it is clear that Washington is determined to weaken not only the tentacles of criminal factions, but also the influence of authoritarian regimes on the continent. Given this scenario, the inevitable question arises. Could these actions in the political and military fields of the United States directly affect the federal Supreme Court in Brazil? International pressure has already shown its strength in other countries, and the Brazilian institutional crisis could become the target of similar measures. Leave your opinion here in the comments and share what could actually happen in Brazil, considering real facts and not just remote hypotheses. Here at Vida No Quartel, you stay up to date with everything happening in the military world. Leave your like, subscribe, and watch one of the videos appearing on your screen. Forward fighters, see you next time.